My name is Daniel Mercer. I'm 52 years old, and today I found myself sitting in a courtroom in downtown Dallas, Texas, watching the woman I once believed was the love of my life try to destroy me. The wooden benches behind me creaked with the shifting weight of spectators, their whispers blending with the hum of the air conditioning. A handful of reporters scribbled in their notepads, eager to splash my private life across the morning papers. My company had grown large enough to make headlines, and now my divorce had turned into some kind of public spectacle. Across the room sat Claire, my wife of 7 years. Her blonde hair was curled into perfect waves, her dress was designer, and her smile was as smug as I'd ever seen it. She leaned toward her attorney, whispering like she already knew she'd won. Her confidence was nauseating, but I kept my face still, my hands folded neatly on the table in front of me. I've learned in life that silence unnerves people more than anger ever could. Her attorney stood tall, smooth voice filling the room. Your Honor, my client is entitled to half of all marital assets, including Mr. Mercer's company, Mercer Logistics, his real estate holdings, and the ranch inherited from his late father. He said it like he was reading out a grocery list, as if the sum of my entire life's work could be catalogued and handed over to a woman who hadn't lifted a finger to build any of it. I felt my stomach turn, but I didn't flinch, because sitting in the folder beside me was the one thing that would change everything. Judge Holloway, a man with salt and pepper hair and a reputation for being strict but fair, leaned back in his chair and adjusted his glasses. His voice carried across the courtroom. Mr. Mercer, do you have any response to these claims? I glanced at Claire. She sat with her chin raised, eyes glittering with the same arrogance I once mistook for confidence. My heart thudded in my chest, but my voice came out steady. Yes, Your Honor. I do. But first, if I may, I'd like to tell the court how we got here. The judge nodded. Proceed. I leaned back slightly, letting my eyes drift for a moment. And just like that, I was back in time, back to the moment she first walked into my life. It was 8 years ago. My father had just passed away, and I was left with more than grief. I had his ranch outside of Fort Worth, acres of land and cattle that had been in our family for 3 generations. On top of that, I was running Mercer Logistics, the oilfield supply chain company I had been building for 15 years. Between work and grief, I hardly had time to sleep, let alone think about dating. Then came the charity gala in Dallas. I wasn't even supposed to be there, but a client had invited me, and I couldn't say no. That's where I saw Claire for the first time. She wore a red dress that caught every man's attention in the room, but somehow, she walked straight up to me. You look like you don't want to be here, she said, smiling. She was right. I didn't. But her smile, her laugh, it cut through the heaviness I'd been carrying. For the first time in months, I forgot about death, business contracts, and responsibilities. She asked questions about my company, my ranch, my life. She listened intently, eyes shining like I was the most interesting man alive. Back then, I thought it was real. I thought she saw me, Daniel Mercer, a man broken but trying to stand tall. Our relationship moved fast. Dinners, weekends at the ranch, trips to places I'd never had time to visit before. Claire had this way of making life feel lighter, like she was pulling me out of the quicksand of grief. When she said she loved me, I believed her. When she told me she wanted to build a future together, I didn't question it. Looking back now, I realized she wasn't falling in love with me. She was studying me. She was studying the land, the company, the lifestyle, the money. 8 months after we met, I proposed. I thought I was giving her the world, but really, I was handing her the keys to my vault. I cleared my throat and looked back at Judge Holloway. Your Honor, when Claire and I married, I believed in her. I believed in our future. I gave her everything she asked for. I never thought she would betray me. But betrayal rarely comes announced. It creeps in slowly. I saw Claire's smile tighten, just slightly. Her lawyer shifted, uneasy. I continued, voice calm but firm. 6 years into our marriage, I inherited additional assets from my father, his ranch, his savings, and his investments. Around the same time, my company doubled in size after landing a major contract. That's when Claire changed. She quit her job as a realtor, said she wanted to focus on us. But what she really wanted was to spend. Vacations. Cars. Jewelry. It didn't take long before I realized I was funding a lifestyle she thought she was entitled to. The judge raised his eyebrows. "And you allowed this?" "I did," I admitted, because I still believed she loved me. Until the day I discovered emails she sent to her sister, bragging about how she'd married smart and would never have to work again after the divorce. That was 6 months ago. She'd already spoken with attorneys. She'd already planned this. The gallery behind me murmured. Reporters scribbled faster. Claire's smile faltered, just for a moment, before she straightened her shoulders. I looked down at the folder by my hand, the manila envelope that held the one thing standing between me and ruin. I didn't open it yet. Not yet. Timing was everything. "Your Honor," I said quietly, "I'll let the evidence speak for itself. But I want it on record that I am not the one who came into this courtroom today looking to take what doesn't belong to me." Judge Holloway nodded, his eyes narrowing. "Very well, Mr. Mercer. We'll proceed." I sat back in my chair, heart still pounding, but my face calm. Claire shifted in her seat, whispering urgently to her lawyer. She thought she had me trapped. She thought I was the fool. What she didn't know, what she could never imagine, was that she had already signed her own defeat years ago. When people ask how a man like me, an oilfield businessman with more than 2 decades of experience, could be fooled, I don't get defensive. I've learned that love doesn't care about experience. Love doesn't care about contracts, about balance sheets, about history. Love blinds you, plain and simple. I wasn't looking for Claire when I met her, but she made herself impossible to ignore. She knew exactly what to say, how to tilt her head when she listened, how to laugh at my dry humor. It felt good, after years of burying myself in work, to have someone look at me like I wasn't just a paycheck or a last name. She made me feel seen. That was her talent. The first year of our marriage was like living in a dream. She decorated the ranch house, brought life into the cold spaces I'd ignored after my father's death, and convinced me to travel when I would have otherwise been glued to my desk. For a while, I believed I'd finally balanced love and success. But the cracks showed early that IT started with small comments. "Daniel, you work too much. Don't you trust me to handle things?" Or, "Why do you always talk to your lawyer before making decisions? Don't you think I'm capable of understanding these things?" At first, I thought she just wanted to feel included. So, I opened the books a little. I let her sit in on meetings she had no business attending. I let her advise on purchases that I would have otherwise declined. It seemed harmless. Then came the spending. A new car, because the one I bought her last year didn't fit her image. Trips to New York, Aspen, Paris, each trip under the guise of us time, though I was always buried in emails while she shopped. Designer handbags and jewelry appeared in closets like weeds in a garden. I told myself I could afford it. And I could. But it wasn't the money that ate at me. It was the shift. Claire wasn't the woman in the red dress who'd laughed with me at the gala. She had become someone else. Someone hungry, restless, entitled. I should have acted sooner. But love makes excuses. The turning point came 2 years into the marriage. One afternoon, I sat with my attorney, Alan Brewer, a man who had been with my family since my father's first land deal in the 1970s. He was as much a family friend as he was a lawyer. He leaned across his oak desk, steepling his fingers, and said, "Daniel, I've seen this before. You need protection. Claire's name is already tied to too much. If things ever turn sour, you could lose more than you realize." I frowned. "Alan, we signed a prenup." He nodded. "We did. But she quit her job. She's completely financially dependent now. That makes her case stronger if she ever decides to walk away. You need a postnuptial agreement, one that makes it absolutely clear that your father's inheritance and your company remain untouchable." I resisted. The idea felt cold. "Alan, you're asking me to hand my wife a paper that says I don't trust her." Alan sighed. "You're not protecting yourself from Claire the woman. You're protecting yourself from Claire the adversary. And believe me, those are 2 different people. If she loves you, she'll sign without hesitation." I didn't know then just how right he was. That evening, I brought it up to Claire over dinner. Alan suggested we draft a postnup, I said casually, twirling a fork in my steak. Her eyes narrowed. What? A postnuptial agreement. It just clarifies the prenup, since you're not working anymore. It keeps the business and the ranch separate. Everything else we share as normal. For a moment, she looked offended, like I'd just accused her of robbery. So, what, you don't trust me? I forced a smile. It's just paperwork, Claire. Nothing changes. You'll still have access to everything we have together. But Alan insists. It's for peace of mind. She huffed, rolled her eyes, then waved her hand. Fine. If it'll shut him up, I'll sign it. I don't care. Those were her exact words. I don't care. The next week, she signed it in Alan's office without even reading the fine print. She was too busy checking her phone, texting her friends about a weekend trip. I watched her scrawl her name across the bottom of the page, oblivious to the fact that she was locking herself out of everything she'd one day try to steal. I should have felt relieved. Instead, I felt guilty, like I had just betrayed her trust. Funny how time changes perspective. The years rolled on. My company grew faster than I expected. Oilfield contracts poured in, and I expanded into equipment leasing. Revenue doubled. Then tripled. The ranch land, too, became more valuable as development crept closer to its borders. My net worth soared, though I never flaunted it. I drove the same truck, wore the same boots, kept the same routine. Claire, on the other hand, made sure everyone knew she was rich. She started hosting parties, extravagant, loud affairs with people I barely knew. She loved being the center of attention, loved hearing people whisper about her wardrobe, her jewelry, her beauty. I watched her transform into someone who thrived on spectacle. And then came the first whispers of betrayal. A friend of mine, an old college buddy, pulled me aside at a fundraiser. Daniel, he said, hesitating, you might want to keep an eye on Claire. I've seen her around town, and not always with you. I wanted to dismiss it, but the seed was planted. Then came the late nights, the unexplained trips, the vague answers. Every time I asked, she brushed me off with a laugh. You're paranoid, she'd say, sipping her wine. Don't be ridiculous. But deep down, I knew something was off. The confirmation came 6 months before the divorce papers arrived. I was at the office late when her laptop, one she'd left at the ranch, pinged with an email notification. I don't make a habit of snooping, but something told me to look. What I found shattered whatever illusions I had left. Emails to her sister, pages of them, bragging about how she'd married smart. How she was planning her exit. How she'd already spoken to lawyers who told her she could get half of everything. She even joked about how she'd never have to work another day in her life. I sat there in the glow of that laptop screen, my chest hollow, my hands shaking. The woman who once told me I was her anchor was mapping out how to cut the rope. But instead of confronting her, I did something else. I closed the laptop, sat in silence, and remembered Alan's words from years ago. If she loves you, she'll sign without hesitation. She had signed. She had sealed her fate with her own careless hand. That night, as Claire returned from yet another dinner out, laughing into her phone, I poured myself a glass of bourbon and made a quiet decision. I would let her play her game. I would let her walk into court with her smug smile, her high-priced lawyer, her arrogance. And when the time was right, I would show her the document she'd forgotten all about. The document that made her entire plan worthless. The postnuptial agreement. The sound of the gavel echoed through the courtroom, sharp and final, calling the session back into focus. Judge Holloway adjusted his glasses and glanced at Claire's attorney. You may proceed. Her lawyer, a tall, smooth-talking man named Grant Whitaker, stood with the kind of arrogance only expensive suits and a history of easy victories can give. He walked toward the center, gesturing grandly like he was performing on stage. Your Honor, he began, my client devoted 7 years of her life to Mr. Mercer. She gave up her career to support his. She maintained the household, accompanied him to events, and played the role of partner while he built his empire. Without her, Mercer Logistics would not be what it is today. She is entitled to nothing less than half of everything. Claire tilted her chin proudly. Reporters scribbled furiously. A few heads in the gallery nodded in sympathy. To them, she looked like the devoted wife abandoned by a heartless businessman. I kept my expression calm, though inside, my blood simmered. Not because of what he said, lies had lost their sting by now, but because of how easily she sat there, smug, as if she hadn't spent years plotting this moment. Grant continued. Furthermore, we seek spousal support. Given Mr. Mercer's significant wealth, it is only fair that Mrs. Mercer maintain the standard of living she has become accustomed to. She should not be punished for sacrifices she made in the marriage. Sacrifices. The word nearly made me laugh. Claire's idea of sacrifice was choosing between Paris in the spring or Aspen in the winter. When Grant finally sat down, the judge turned to me. Mr. Mercer, your response? I stood slowly, buttoning my jacket, and walked to the front of the room. My boots clicked against the polished wood floor, echoing in the silence. I didn't look at Claire. I didn't need to. Your Honor, I began, voice steady, it's true that my wife quit her job. It's true that she's been at my side during events. But what's also true is this: she didn't quit her job to support me. She quit because she no longer wanted to work. And the household she supposedly managed? That was handled by the staff I paid for. The parties she hosted, the trips she demanded, they weren't sacrifices. They were indulgences. A murmur rippled through the room. Claire's smile tightened. I let the silence stretch before continuing. But don't take my word for it. Let me share something in her own words. I reached into the folder Alan had prepared for me. From it, I pulled several printed pages, emails. Alan had verified their authenticity, and the court clerk had them logged as evidence. These, I said, handing them to the bailiff, are emails between Claire and her sister. In them, she outlines her plan to divorce me once she could claim half my assets. She brags about never needing to work again. She even laughs about how easy it would be. Gasps filled the courtroom as the judge read over the pages. Claire's face drained of color, then flushed red. Objection! Grant barked, leaping to his feet. Those emails are taken out of context. Overruled, Judge Holloway said firmly. I can read, Mr. Whitaker. And the context is clear. Claire shifted in her chair, glaring at me with a fury I'd never seen. For years, she had hidden that side behind charm and practice smiles. Now it bled through, raw and unfiltered. I didn't flinch. Your Honor, I said softly, I built my company before I ever met Claire. I inherited my father's ranch long before she entered my life. Everything she is asking for belongs not just to me, but to the generations before me. She knew that. And years ago, she agreed to it. I let those words hang in the air. Not yet. Not the final blow. Timing was everything. Grant scrambled to recover. Even if those emails are genuine, Mrs. Mercer is still entitled under Texas marital law. She deserves. I cut in, my voice sharp for the first time. The room went still. She deserves exactly what she agreed to. Nothing more. The judge's eyes narrowed. Mr. Mercer, what exactly do you mean by that? I turned back toward my table, lifted the manila envelope, and held it carefully, like a weapon I'd been waiting years to use. With the court's permission, I'd like to submit one final piece of evidence. Alan, seated just behind me, gave a subtle nod. This was the moment. The bailiff carried the envelope to the judge. Holloway opened it, scanning the document with growing interest. He adjusted his glasses again, reading slower this time, lips moving slightly as he took in each clause. Finally, he looked up. Is this a postnuptial agreement? Yes, Your Honor, I said calmly. Signed by Claire Mercer, witnessed and notarized, 5 years ago. It clearly states that Mercer Logistics, the ranch, and all inherited assets remain separate property. Furthermore, it waives any claim to spousal support. Mrs. Mercer receives only what we accumulated together, excluding those assets. The silence in the room was deafening. Then came the whispers, the gasps, the hurried scratching of reporters' pens. Claire's face was a mask of shock and rage. That's not possible, she hissed, turning to her lawyer. I never signed that. I don't. But her voice faltered, because somewhere deep inside she remembered. She remembered Alan's office. She remembered brushing it off as just paperwork. She remembered signing without reading. Grant leaned down, whispering harshly to her, his face pale. I stood tall, hands folded behind my back, my voice low but clear. Claire signed this willingly. She was not coerced. Her signature is there for all to see. She thought she was setting a trap for me, but she walked into her own. The law protects her rights, but the law also enforces her agreements. And she agreed. Judge Holloway tapped his gavel lightly, bringing the murmurs under control. His expression was stern, unreadable, but his words cut through the room like a blade. This changes everything. The courtroom felt different after Judge Holloway's words. The smug energy that had radiated from Claire since the moment we walked in was gone, replaced with a silence so heavy it seemed to press against the walls. The judge leaned back, tapping the postnuptial agreement with the end of his pen. Mrs. Mercer, he said slowly, this is your signature? Claire's lips trembled. I don't remember. It's notarized, the judge cut her off. Your memory is irrelevant. Your signature is here, verified and witnessed. This agreement is valid. Her lawyer tried one last desperate push. Your Honor, surely you can see that this document is unfair. Mrs. Mercer was at a disadvantage. She didn't understand what she was signing. Judge Holloway's eyes narrowed. Ignorance is not a defense, Mr. Whitaker, especially when we're talking about a notarized legal document. Mrs. Mercer signed of her own free will. She waived her rights. The court will honor that. The gavel struck once, sharp and final. The assets listed in this postnuptial agreement are excluded from division. Mercer Logistics, the ranch, and inherited funds remain solely with Mr. Mercer. Mrs. Mercer will receive only the marital assets acquired outside of those protections. Furthermore, the waiver of spousal support stands. The room erupted in whispers, gasps, the frantic scratching of pens. The reporters had just found their headline. Claire's face turned pale, then blotched red with fury. This isn't fair, she shouted, rising to her feet. You can't do this to me. The bailiff stepped forward as the judge's gavel slammed again. Order! Order in the court! But Claire wasn't finished. She spun toward me, eyes blazing with hatred. You think you've won, Daniel? You think this is over? You tricked me. You and that old lawyer of yours, you set me up. I met her glare with calm, steady eyes. For years, she'd made me doubt myself. For years, she'd chipped away at my peace with her demands and manipulations. But in that moment, she had no power left. I didn't trick you, Claire, I said quietly. You tricked yourself. Her knees buckled, and she sank back into her chair, face buried in her hands. Her lawyer sat beside her, defeated, avoiding her eyes. The rest of the proceedings felt like background noise. The division of minor assets. The judge's closing remarks. The bailiff escorting us out. My ears buzzed with adrenaline, but my face remained calm. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed, shouting questions. Mr. Mercer, how does it feel to win? Did you plan this all along? Do you have a message for your ex-wife? I didn't stop. I didn't answer. Alan shielded me as we pushed through the chaos, and when we reached the car, I exhaled for the first time all day. Daniel, Alan said as we slid inside, you handled that perfectly. I gave him a tired smile. I just told the truth. The rest handled itself. He chuckled. The truth and a well-written contract. That night, I sat on the porch of my father's ranch, a glass of bourbon in hand. The Texas sky stretched wide above me, stars scattered like diamonds. The cattle lowed in the distance, the same sound I'd grown up with, the sound that reminded me of where I came from. Claire had thought she could take this from me. She had thought she could erase decades of sweat, sacrifice, and hard work with a signature on divorce papers. But she had underestimated two things: the lessons my father drilled into me, and the quiet patience I had learned from years of running a business. I thought of him then, my father. A man who believed that contracts were sacred, that words mattered, that trust should never be given blindly. If he were alive, he would have shaken his head at how easily I'd let Claire into my life. But I like to think he would have been proud of how I protected what he left behind. Claire would walk away with nothing more than what she'd squandered. The parties, the jewelry, the vacations, those were her true inheritance. Empty things bought on borrowed time. As for me, I still had the ranch. I still had my company. I still had my peace. And in the quiet of that Texas night, I made myself a promise. I would never again mistake charm for love or arrogance for confidence. I would live simply, honestly, and carefully. Because in the end, revenge didn't require shouting, fighting, or destroying. Sometimes, revenge was just waiting patiently for the truth to speak for itself. This was just one of many stories where revenge takes an unexpected turn. Hit subscribe if you want more endings you'll never see coming. Drop a comment. What would you have done in their shoes?